On July 6, 1734, a Dano-Norwegian missionary, explorer and surveyor, Hans Egede, famously documented an encounter with a creature that was as terrifying as it was mysterious. The vessel he was travelling on had been crossing the Davis Strait, a stretch of water situated between Greenland and Canada's Baffin Island, when a disturbance in the water caught the crew's attention. It wasn't long before they realised that what they were witnessing was a gigantic sea creature, the likes of which none of them had ever seen before. In his journal, Egede wrote that the creature was a very large and frightful sea monster, which raised itself so high out of the water that its head was above the height of the mainmast. He described it as having a long, sharp snout, and it was observed spouting water into the air, a bit like a whale. Its skin was uneven, wrinkled and covered in scales, while its lower body was shaped like a giant snake. He wrote, "After some time, the creature plunged backwards into the water and then turned its tail up above the surface, a whole ship length from the head." Egede wasn't the only crew member to document the incident either. Another of the missionaries on board drew a sketch of the creature, which you can see here, and described how the beast's eyes were reddish and almost burning with fire. The encounter ended almost as quickly as it had begun, with the great beast slinking back down beneath the waves, never to be seen again. Although no definitive explanation for the sighting has ever been found, more recent interpretations of the incident have suggested that the creature that Egede had encountered that day may have been a giant squid, a very real animal that is very seldom seen due to its tendency to live at depths of up to 3,000 feet beneath the waves. It is estimated that some individuals can grow to gargantuan sizes, possibly greater than 65 feet in length. Whether or not this is what the crew saw back in 1734, however, continues to remain a mystery. On August 6, 1848, the HMS Daedalus, a Royal Navy frigate that had been sailing between the Cape of Good Hope and St. Helena, encountered something in the water that would go on to spark discussion and debate that continues to this day. According to the official report of the ship's captain, Peter McQuay, the crew had observed what was described as a gargantuan serpent-like creature in the water. This immense beast was dark brown in colour, with yellowish-white markings around its throat. Its head protruded around 4 feet above the water, while its body stretched for some 60 feet in a straight line across the surface. It was also estimated that another 30 to 40 feet of its length remained concealed beneath the waves. The crew determined that it was travelling at speeds of up to 15 miles per hour, and it remained visible for as long as 20 minutes. The captain wrote, "The creature passed rapidly, but so close under our lee quarter that had it been a man of my acquaintance, I should have easily recognized his features with the naked eye." Although McQuay described it as a giant serpent, one of the other officers maintained that it was more like a lizard than a snake. Exactly what the crew of the Daedalus encountered that day remains unclear. Some experts have suggested that they may have come across a type of large whale, while others remain unconvinced. Whatever the case, there is no doubt that the memory of the encounter would have stuck with the crew for the rest of their lives. In 1978, the USS Stein, a US Navy Knox-class destroyer escort vessel, was literally attacked by an unidentified multi-tentacled behemoth from the depths. The crew had first become aware that something was amiss when they noticed anomalies with the ship's sonar system during routine operations in the Pacific. At first, they decided to simply keep an eye on the issue, but as the problem worsened, it soon became apparent that something was very wrong. Given the importance of the ship's sonar system, the decision was ultimately made to return to port so that the sonar could be properly examined and any issues diagnosed. When engineers got a good look at the sonar dome, however, it became apparent that something extraordinary had befallen it. It appeared that some sort of large creature had literally attacked the dome, as evidenced by the long, deep scratches in its protective rubber coating. What's more, small pieces of sharp, curved claws were found embedded inside the various cuts and gouges, seemingly those of whatever animal had been responsible. An analysis of these revealed that they were actually those of the suction cups found on the tentacles of a squid, but not just any ordinary squid. These were from an animal much, much larger. The creature responsible would have been enormous, a genuine monster of the deep. What's more, there were no known species on record that could account for the marks on the sonar dome, meaning that this giant of the depths was a new species, something that nobody had ever seen before. The incident not only proved that such leviathans actually exist, but that they were capable of actively engaging in attacks on passing vessels. On December 7th, 1905, two respected British zoologists, Michael J. Nichol and E.G.B. Meade Waldo, had an encounter with something unexplained off the coast of Brazil. It had been just after 10 a.m. in the morning, and their yacht, the Valhalla, had been sailing 15 miles to the east of the mouth of Brazil's Paraíba River. The strangeness began when Nichol spotted a large dorsal fin sticking out of the water that he said resembled that of no fish he had previously seen. It was around 6 foot long and 18 inches high. Meade Waldo also described it as dark seaweed brown and crinkled at the edge. Just as he was about to observe it through his binoculars, a great serpent-like neck and head, which resembled that of a turtle, rose from the water. The pair estimated that the neck stretched 8 feet above the surface and was as thick as a man's body. The creature swayed from side to side for a brief time before splashing back down into the water. The two men could see a large shape beneath the surface, but couldn't make it out clearly. Interestingly, the crew encountered what they believed to be the same creature again the following day. This time, though, it was entirely submerged as it passed the side of their boat. With both men being respected zoologists, their descriptions of the mysterious beast were considered particularly authoritative at the time. Despite their detailed accounts of the encounter, however, no definitive explanation for what they saw that day was ever found. In early February 1912, a tragic incident occurred on the west coast of Tasmania, Australia, that would go on to lead to a horrifying discovery. The Zeehan and Dundas Herald newspaper had reported on the passing of a respected local man, Richard Shaw Burke, who had gone on a fishing trip with a friend a few days earlier. The weather had been calm, and Burke had decided to venture out onto an exposed rocky outcrop, a place that was typically quite treacherous, but which, on this occasion, had seemed safe due to the clement conditions. Sadly, though, while he was fishing from the rocks, a sudden freak wave crashed against the outcrop and swept Burke off his feet and into the water. All his friend could do was watch helplessly from some distance off as he struggled against the tide before promptly disappearing out to sea. With little hope of finding him alive, a search party set out a short time later with the unenviable task of retrieving his body. They scoured the coastline for any sign of him, but eventually had to give up. Exactly what had become of Burke would seem to have ended up as a mystery that would never be solved. But then, around a year later, two boys who had been fishing along the same stretch of coastline reported that something large and unexpected had become tangled up in their nets. Initially believing it to be a crayfish, they were stunned to discover that what they had picked up was a huge octopus. It was so large that they struggled to drag it off the rocks. Measurements later confirmed that the cephalopod was 12 foot 6 inches long and 3 feet wide. At the time, it was believed to be the largest octopus ever caught in the region. It is what happened next, however, that would prove the most shocking. When the octopus was opened up, the fishing party discovered to their horror a large piece of a man's shirt inside its stomach. It turned out that this was in fact the very shirt that Richard Shaw Burke had been wearing at the time he was swept off the rocks a year earlier. This chance discovery could only mean that the poor man had at one point been feasted upon by the beast, perhaps even while he was still alive. Had Burke happened upon the creature while struggling to reach the surface all those months ago? Did it cause his death, or did it simply happen upon his body after he had drowned? The idea that a human could be attacked by a giant octopus is not unheard of. There have been reports of divers being attacked, and cephalopods will eat human flesh. Whatever happened to Burke, part of him at least had clearly ended up in the belly of a giant cephalopod. Perhaps tales of seafarers being eaten up by giant multi-tentacled horrors are not quite as far-fetched as they seem.